Okay, everybody, I'm here with Garrett Mays. He was a former player at football player at Cathedral Prep. He graduated in the year 2000. Garrett, how you doing today?
Very well, thanks for having me.
Great, thanks for being here. So why don't you start out by telling us where you grew up at, what city, what state?
Yep, so grew up on West Hershey Road, and the funny thing about Hershey Road was the kids across the street went to McDowell. The kids west of my house went to Fort LaBeouf, and I went to McCain Elementary, then James W. Parker and General McLean. So I ended up with the, hour and a half bus ride every day.
Wow.
But it was a great place to grow up. It was in the country. I didn't really have the neighborhood. There wasn't five kids to,
Like a bunch of houses
there wasn't
around.
3-on-3 up there. You kind of made up your own 3-on-3 up there with a sister, and I had a sister who played basketball. She was a good athlete, played basketball, and we lived up on a hill, and when there was snow on the ground, we found ways to play in the snow, all summer we had a big pond in the back. Did a little triathlons with the bike, and swim across the pond, run to your bike. We had a lot of fun there, and it was a nice place to grow up. And then going to General McLean, I know Drew Astorino, who was on here, spoke of the 3-on-3 tournaments in Embro. So if you went to James W. Parker and you played sports, especially basketball, that was a huge thing. So I got to play in that, and had R.J. English, I know, who was mentioned on the site there, was pretty much my idol, while I was at General McLean. And but growing up, my dad was big out in Girard and watched Mark Blucas.
Oh, okay.
Actually went to the state championship when they played against, it was like a GAR Memorial or something, I don't remember, but I was pretty young. But it was, always grew up in basketball, football. My dad played in the Save and I game, played football out of Girard for years. So, kind of just always grew up in the sports atmosphere.
Okay, cool. So school-wise, what type of student would you have considered yourself? When you look back at it, was school pretty easy for you? Was it?
It's my parents always made sure I kept my grades. I was fortunate enough for them to always stay on me. I wouldn't say I was an exceptional student by any means, but at prep you didn't really have a choice. I'll never forget going around and having each teacher give you the check mark, and you couldn't get a couple check marks, you weren't practicing. So that was a terrible feeling. You'd always be everyone would be nervous on the football team or any sport. You have to do it for any sport.
Right.
But I remember the cards, you'd have to get the checks, and if you didn't get 2 checks and couldn't show up to practice, you didn't want to, you had a few conversations ahead of you that you didn't necessarily want to have. So
Right. So was there high expectations, you think, for academics there when you were there?
I think it was first and foremost, for sure.
Right. So how did you get into sports? I mean, I know you said you played in the yard, and you didn't have a big neighborhood and that, but you did a lot of things. But how did you get into formal sports?
So I remember my dad always, soccer wasn't as respected as much around my house with my dad. He was always a big American football guy. But soccer, you could play soccer before you could play tackle football back in these days. So I remember it was 1 year of soccer, a lot of just running around crazy. But after that, T-ball, Little Gritters. The Enbro McCain Little Gritters was, I think, a great program. McCain Jets, Enbro Chiefs. Back in the day, we'd come in and play some Mill Creek teams. And the thing I was thinking about, before coming to chat with you was, coming from the county, and being successful and having sports-wise, having a 7th and 8th grade's kind of an awkward year for anyone growing up, but that's really, I think, when 5th and 6th, 7th and 8th grade, you start to kind of differentiate yourself from, is this something I want to do,
Right.
or should I maybe try a new hobby?
Right.
And you kind of see where you excel at this and that. And really growing up, my dad would send me to the Edinburgh Fighting Scots basketball camp every summer, and you'd stay there in the dorms for a week, and that gave me an opportunity to meet a lot of other people, outside of General McLean.
Right.
But having a lot of success in those camps. AAU wasn't as big of a thing back then. It was kind of just getting started up, I think, basketball-wise. But playing in the boys and girls tournaments, downtown, I'll never forget, the tiny gym at the Boys and Girls Club, and then the gyms at the Y, but people just packed.
Oh, yeah, packed.
Playing against Justin Schaus and, McDowell, fantastic teams. And then, starting out, going to prep as a freshman, playing in the Marcel Araby camp, I played with fantastic athletes at General McLean, till 8th grade, and they went on to be fantastic athletes. They still are. I can name a whole bunch of names right now. But, coming from the county now, coming to the city where it's just a melting pot of people coming from everywhere, and all of a sudden, the kids battling to even make the team could have been standouts in other places.
Right.
For the first time having competition, like I gotta play well, or I might not, make the team. I might be playing CYO, which I had no idea what CYO was until I came to prep. From the county, no one really knew what CYO was. But and nothing to take away nothing from CYO, but I think it was kind of a wake-up call, like, this is where you got to decide, your future and what you want to do.
Right. So was that coming in and probably, like you said, being around a melting pot now of people, was that something that took, talk about that a little bit?
It was definitely an adjustment. I didn't have the, group of friends going in there that kids I knew from grade school. They're kids I knew of, or maybe have seen here and there, but I was brand new there, and I think that some of those groups didn't necessarily want another person coming in, that's gonna vie for time on the court or on the field or here and there. But it quickly mended, and I at prep I'll never forget, sitting in homeroom in the first period class, I've got a kid who's leaving for half the day to go practice with the Otters. I'm a freshman in high school, Jordan Legacy. He'd leave, go practice with the Otters, come back to school. We had a fantastic hockey team back then. But one of my fondest memories of prep was, I kind of got there. I got a little award at the Marcel Araby basketball camp. I felt like I was settling in, like this is where I'm supposed to be. I'm happy I made this decision. Now let's see what can happen. It was a tough transition, but everything kind of settled in quickly, and I was ready.
Did you did you play basketball in high school, or was it just football?
Basketball really was my thing. I thought basketball would be my thing. And then at the James W. Parker Middle School, when we were in 8th grade, we were running and jumping, and we grabbed the net on the side hoops, and they would swing up. That was the fun thing to do. But I came down and my finger wouldn't bend. So going into my freshman year at prep, over the summer, they replaced the tendon in my finger. So I didn't play freshman football at prep. That healed, played freshman basketball.
Okay.
Then, spent a lot of time with the football team during the season, on the sidelines helping video, this and that.
Right.
And then the summer, I think that the summer after my freshman year, for a lack of better terms, kind of blossomed. I was pretty fast, and ended up going into camp, or after camp, came back, and Bob Sanders, Eric Carlson, our quarterback, and myself had varsity lockers.
Okay.
So that was a huge...
That was 10th grade?
Yeah, that was a huge deal for us to finish up camp, go into the varsity locker room, have a nice big, varsity locker with our name on it. That's something I'll never forget as well. But also during that summer, I was running routes next to Larry Fitzgerald at the Metro Index football camp.
Right.
Obviously back then he wasn't who he is now, but he was still a fast, didn't have quite the dreads back then, but looking back at it now, it's even more amazing. But to be in trips with Larry Fitzgerald, catching passes right neck, running routes 7-on-7, pretty amazing memory. But yeah, everything really happened fast. Played varsity football, kind of, took the main stage for me then. It was a big deal coming from the county and playing varsity as a sophomore at prep. My dad hyped it up a lot. My mom hyped it up a lot, I'm sure. But I was excited, and that team, and a lot of the guys on that team, the seniors on that team, that was a tough year for prep. This was
that was 98. What year was it? 97, 98?
97.
97.
Stan Berchtold, great guy. Thought he was a great coach. He was the coach then. It was just like it was almost like that last team before what ended up being a pretty solid dynasty.
McDowell had some good years there.
Well, McDowell beating up on us that year. It wasn't easy being a prep football player in 97, that's for sure. But I think, as we know, things quickly changed in Western Pennsylvania and the whole state, and I guess the country too. So.
Yeah. So you guys in '98, you kind of came into your own, right? and I know you got to like the Western Finals. What was that year like when you guys started to turn it around? Like, you remember that?
I do. I fondly remember it. That was another thing that happened quick. My junior year was obviously my best year as far as being a wide receiver and numbers and touchdowns and catches. But all of a sudden, like, I remember Craig Woodard that was on the news, C. Wood, he was awesome. And it's almost like you could see if you watched it, back then there was so much, you appreciated the news at night a lot more. You appreciated the newspaper the next morning a lot more. I think we missed out on that. But there was a little buzz, we had some phenomenal athletes. Like, we were just deep. Our fifth string running back, honestly, was tough, could start in a lot of programs.
Other places.
I've got probably 3 of the top 10 fastest people in the state on this team with me. I was pretty quick myself. Track and field, a lot of us ran track and field. It was a great way to stay in shape, jumps and everything.
Right.
The camaraderie was there, all of a sudden I have the whole track and field team circled around the high jump pit,
right,
winning the Metro high jump, and people going nuts. And, one thing led to another. Then the junior year, making it to the Western Finals, there were some, like, 10,000 some people.
Yeah, I think I was at the game when you guys played it. Yeah.
Standing room only at the stadium was. It's unthinkable. I was laughing too, thinking about the stadium is coming down those huge concrete steps. It's tough. Try it with the face mask on. You can't see those steps. Right. That was a memory. Going into the gym, getting torn. I remember, once we started doing really well, and we might be up 21-0 at halftime against the team, and you could hear a pin drop in the locker room, because we would know that we did some things that weren't right. The discipline was definitely there, but along with that discipline, there's just the hype you could start to feel going into my junior and senior year for sure.
So you talked about the discipline, motivation, and stuff like that. Do you feel like the guys that go to prep that you play with, like, they had that, or did the coaches? Where does that come from? Like, when you put on a prep helmet, does it automatically just, it's a different standard?
Coming from the county and not being necessarily in the Erie parochial, system, so to say, before that, I remember when thinking about going to prep, seeing that brochure with the guys in the white tuxedos, graduating and shaking hands, looking sharp, the haircuts. I appreciated the formalities. Your sideburns had to be at the middle of your ear. Those things I always appreciated, whereas plenty other people did not appreciate those things.
Right.
And there were plenty of those people at prep as well. As far as discipline goes, of course, any athlete has to have some sort of discipline, but I definitely think that prep does a fantastic job in instilling the reason for the discipline.
So it's kind of you know why it's happening.
We're getting on you about this because there's a very good reason why. And once you can start understanding the reasoning behind the discipline, then the sky's the limit.
Right. Which now too, I mean, like, because I work in schools, like kids now, you have to be able to explain to them why. Like, I feel like coming out of my generation, we just did it because adults said do it. Now kids want to know, well, why do I need to do that?
And it's probably a lot more difficult.
Right, and you have to be explaining to them.
Sure.
So going after the '98 season, you guys are what was the thought going into '99?
So I mean, we have this phenomenal freshman running back coming up. We have the sophomore class there. Most of them, there are a significant amount more of them playing varsity. The names Hinkle, Lustig, Jason Easter, Timmy Dance. These are kids, still young kids coming up to varsity now, like we are. That we're immediately, playmakers. We knew they were. That we knew at practice. Warming up when we're warming up and every single person's on cadence, right on. When you're at a practice that things are happening, when it just happens. You know what I mean? There's no other fluff. You go from station to station, there's nobody walking. You know what I mean? You're sprinting from station to station. You're silent if the coach is talking. If you hear a whistle, you're running. There were a high majority of our practices, if not all, were like that. Joe Moore, amazing. I know line and defense, and it was his thing, but I'll never forget one day, as a receiver, he told me being a receiver is simple. He said, if you get that corner to turn his hips, you score a touchdown.
Wow.
And I'll tell you what, it made perfect. It was something so simple, but not something you think of.
Right.
And I'll tell you what, I was always looking at that corner's hips. You get him just to move his hips a little, see you later. Just an amazing thing, just a tiny snippet of how amazing it was to work for a staff like that, that can learn from the best who've been around the country.
Right. Mish was the coach at that time, right? Coach Mish was the coach?
First year.
Okay.
Mish's first year was my junior year when we went to the Western Finals.
Okay. That year, I mean, I remember that '99 team, that was must see around the city. Everybody was talking about it. I think did you guys end up going undefeated that year, right? Until the state title game, right? What was that like going to the state championship to get there? What was that like? Not many Erie teams. I think you guys might have been the second team to get there, because I think Strong Vincent got there in '91.
And mess with all my Strong Vincent guys all the time about that. Their record for their state championship. You know what I mean? No dig to any of them, but they do remember their one loss that season. But it's funny that's why I love the whole group. Right. I got so much respect for Coach Cashone, was our coach for the Save Night game. So just a lot of great people there. But state championship, it was something else. You got to think you're deep. It's almost Christmas. I'll never forget, we had practice on Thanksgiving Day, and somebody counted. I don't forget who was counting, but we ran 32 hundreds, the lengths of the field,
Wow.
full pads on Thanksgiving Day. So to give you an idea,
Yeah.
I mean, we were getting ready.
Getting ready to play.
I mean, we ran them, people, keeling over, throwing up, but we ran them, and when you're still practicing football and it's Thanksgiving
Everybody
time,
else is eating turkey, right?
I'll never forget, for the Western Final game, I went down to hunting camp with my dad and everyone, and was down at hunting camp, and then left hunting camp to come back to play that game. And my uncles came to watch the game, and that place was electric. Like, it was, to imagine Veterans Stadium standing room only. It's loud. It's fun. But the state championship, the whole hype up to it, the ESPN came and followed us around an entire day at school. They ended up doing the story on Central Bucks West.
Right, the
You've
coach.
probably
Right,
seen,
right.
You've probably seen that on.
Yeah, I watched it.
But that
Yeah.
same guy followed us around, like, from the moment we're walking into school from the parking lot throughout the day through practice. That was really cool, to have a guy from ESPN. But when you're going to the state championship, especially back then, the news kind of takes over. There's a story just about every night.
Right.
You're going to do interviews with the paper. You're going to the news station. It was a big deal. It's exciting.
Right.
And back to the newspaper too. I'll never forget. We played McDowell, and I had a touchdown right before halftime. And the next day, my mom woke me up crying, bawling her eyes out. Oh my gosh, Garrett, look. And I had the, front page picture of the sports.
Nice.
And that's a great memory of mine as well. But the state championship was awesome. Prep, the boosters and the, alumni really come through. We had beautiful buses. Anytime we'd leave, go out of town, we'd always had great accommodations. So that was always an exciting part. Good food, good meals. But we were really there. We were there to play football and win.
Right.
Knock down this giant Central Bucks West, and But going to Hershey, the field. I from what I remember, the field, it was cold, and when that artificial, that's not artificial grass, but they roll it down.
Right.
When that stuff freezes, it just feels like a foamy, weird.
Right.
But I remember that about it. And there's a lot of hype, but you're still just a high school kid.
Just playing a football game.
You're
right.
going out to do what you can.
Right. Tell me about, so locally, I always wondered, like, Prep and McDowell, like that's, I've been reading the prep history book, like, now that Dan Brabrand wrote, and they talk about that rivalry in that book all the way back to the 40s and 50s. What's it like to get ready for Prep and McDowell game? What's that mean?
I got goosebumps thinking about it right now. Here, this is a situation too where that I was completely, well, I wouldn't say completely. I knew of the rivalry when I was out at GM, but until you're there and in it and at school all day, and your coaches animate it very well, or a rumor will come up, you hear. Whether it's a real rumor or not, could be fabricated. Mitch was good at coming up with some stories that
I've heard some stories about coaches throughout the years, man. Not just Mitch, but some other guys.
Oh yeah, and it's a don't get me wrong, it's a great way to do it, but they'd get it hyped up, and I remember the bus. There was only one time there'd be a peep on the bus up to McDowell or back. It'd only be on the way back, and it'd only be if you won. And I just remember the silence of that bus trip. We'd go to the church and, say a blessing and get back on the bus. Walking up to the steps of the church, there wouldn't be a peep. You wouldn't hear a peep on the bus. We were there for business, and just riding up. You see people, saying stuff. But there's not a lot of people that necessarily like seeing the prep bus go by. Right. You know what I mean? You either like seeing the prep bus go by and you'll wave and honk, or you're gonna do something else to that prep bus going by. But I got a kick out of both. You know what I mean? That's what made it fun.
Right.
Growing up, I was a Browns fan, and the rest of my family was Steeler fans. my dad and I were Browns fans. He had two brothers and a sister. The entire rest of the family was Steeler fans. I wouldn't like football as much if it wasn't for that Browns-Steelers rivalry. You know, if that wasn't there, it would have never caught my attention as much, maybe. But, yeah, the Prep McDowell rivalry was something else. And it's so funny. I think it's the best part about it is having so many friends now who I didn't even know while I was at Prep, who now I've crossed paths through jobs or different friends or, you know, girlfriends or this, that, and the other thing. That some of the greatest people ever, where when I was a junior, senior at Prep, it was anti-McDowell everything.
Yeah.
For no really good reason.
Just the football
that it was, that's how it is.
Right.
You know, bragging rights. My favorite story ever is a couple years after I graduated, I heard the story of, it was McDowell's graduation down at the Civic Center. And Prep had beat him in pretty much everything that year. And while they were in the graduation, a couple Prep students went with these stack of these flyers, and on every single car, "We own you, basketball, football, baseball." So they came out of graduation to their cars. Every single car had a little. I thought that was pretty clever.
So some of the guys you know from McDowell now, do you guys ever go back and forth a little bit?
Oh, all the time. All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And it's great to see a lot of them very successful these days, you know, as well. You know, a lot of battles on the basketball court, you know, on the baseball field. I'll never forget when I was a sophomore, the baseball team played McDowell for the District 10 championship. And it was at Garrett Park, and it was a day game. So the entire student body, you know, shirts and ties, got to leave school, walk over to Garrett for the Prep McDowell D10 baseball game. Brian Tupsky hits a walk-off home run to win it. The greatest moment in my sports history, you know, and I wasn't even playing. I never played baseball. I ran track, you know what I mean? But what an experience. Beautiful afternoon day. That was a cool story.
So what's your greatest Prep memory? Do you have any?
I have a lot. I have a whole lot. And a lot of them still keep happening. You know, I run it selling cars. I run into friends all the time. Kids I graduated with, kids, you know, a year ahead of me, a year behind me. But my greatest Prep memory, that is a good. So at Prep, the gymnasiums within the school. When I was there, they'd have like the underclassmen would go to lunch first. You had like an 18-minute lunch at Prep. It was weird.
Right.
Like the military. You had to get in line.
Get in and get out. Right.
If you're an underclassman, good luck. You better pack. So Sanders and I had gym class our senior year right before lunch. So the underclassmen would be going to lunch while we were in gym class. Well, gym class pretty much consisted of playing basketball or, you know.
Right.
So Sanders and I would be throwing each other alley-oops in gym, and you'd see all the underclassmen lined up in the windows, skipping lunch just to watch us dunk in the gym class. That's a fun memory. But
Any moments you, like, sports-wise, high school, you wish you had back? Like, man, I wish I could do that again, like that one thing, or anything like that, or are you pretty satisfied with everything?
So I was never one, like when we lost a pretty tough state championship. That's a pretty tough way to end your senior year, but I was never one to really beat myself up over it, or let it really affect me. You know, I think it was a great learning experience. But I think my greatest, if there was a regret, was not understanding how, after the fact, you always want to go back. If I could go back right now and be a freshman at Prep next year, see you later. Aside from my kids, I take that back. Right. But if I had that opportunity to go back, and would I do things differently? Yeah, sure. But I don't necessarily regret the things I did while I was there.
Right. So while we're here, you did track too, right? So I know you shared some accomplishments with me. You want to talk about a little bit of that stuff?
So it's kind of funny. If anyone out there knows me, I don't necessarily look like a high jumper or a long jumper or triple jumper, but one of my favorite accomplishments is when I was a junior winning the Metro high jump,
Okay.
which is, I think it was pretty weak back then compared to how the kids jump now. But I think what won it was like 6'1 3/4" or something. So it's fun now to tell my kids and, tell the story that I put my entire body over 6'1 3/4.
Wow. Okay.
Kind of cool.
Did you run a relay too? Did I see you?
Yeah,
run a relay?
probably. I was part of a relay. I was kind of a utility guy on the track and field. Once again, this is a track team with Tim Dance, Jason Easter, Josh Lustig, Ed Hinkle, some very fast dudes.
Right.
But that 4x100 relay, I forget I wasn't on it when they went to states with it. I'm pretty sure. Maybe it was a year after me. I think 4x100 relay was close to winning states or placed in the top three.
Probably.
But,
Yeah.
but looking back, Juwan, Tim Dance, Lustig, Hinkle, and there were a few other guys you could poke in there that
Right.
it was unreal. Ed Hinkle, I'll never forget, him and I, we ran the 300 hurdles together, and we'd battle. And then Ed started getting taller and taller and stronger and stronger.
Right.
And, the more Penn State or Iowa, I was looking, this guy got some muscles all of a sudden. But, boy, seeing him float over, that 300 hurdles is a really tough race. It's a grueling race, and that's a fond memory of mine, is battling with him in 300 hurdles.
What is it like knowing like you played with a guy like Bob Sanders? I mean, who went on to be Defensive Player of the Year in the NFL?
It's amazing. And looking back at it, we were doing a workout at the St. Mary's down there, where all those grueling practices we had, and we were graduated and things were done, and we knew, like, there was like a time, there was some negotiations or something going on with Sanders before he ended up finally getting drafted. But it was funny because we were down there doing workouts, or we did work study to help pay tuition. People think, oh, free ride to prep, Sanders. No, every summer we were down there mowing the lawns, raking, putting garbage away. And so finally when a helicopter went over, and I think they ended up picking up Mish and Bob and his family at the airport. And they flew to Indy, and it was the RCA Dome at the time. And I guess the helicopter took all of them, and they like hovered right over it, and they said, "Welcome to your new home." Wow. I thought that was pretty cool. But going down there, got to see a real cool story. Got to see Eli versus Peyton, first time they ever played each other at the Meadowlands. That was cool. We had the family tickets.
Yeah.
Got to see a game at the RCA Dome and the new one, the new arena out there. And I remember where he lived. You had to go through like 3 or 4 security checks, and he had like Formula One drivers next door, Indiana Pacers across the hall. It was amazing experience.
You still keep in contact with him at all?
Not really.
Oh, okay.
And I don't blame him at all. Time goes on, and I can't imagine being in a situation like him, and I got my memories of him.
Right.
We had a lot of fun, and if I ever saw him, I'm sure when I do see him, it's always a cordial hello. But he does his thing, and I do mine.
So I know you said you're selling cars out there.
Yeah, Cars R Us.
So where you at?
Cars R Us, 26th and Zook. Most of our inventory is $15,000 and below. We do a lot of special finance, so rough credit, repossessions, anything like that. Get a hold of me, we'll work on it and get you in some new wheels.
I see this nice hoodie you got under too. What
That's
you got
a
there?
special shout out to my man Sean Madigan, Dodigan. Funny story I always tell him as well with Dodigan is, there was this young lady I knew from Gannon when I was at Gannon, and we were at her house, and it ends up her dad was a major league umpire.
Wow.
She's like, I have all these hats in my trunk. Do you maybe want them? we go down, and she opens her trunk. She literally had a garbage bag like this of the best colors, fitteds. You know, back then fitteds were the thing. The craziest colors, the most, teams you've never heard of in your life, the coolest hats you'd ever see. And Madigan and I drove around in his Tahoe that day, probably the whole day, and sold just about every single fitted in that bag, and we had our pockets full. So I tell him now, that's where he got his start.
Right.
Apparel and clothing, or selling fitteds with me.
So anything else you want to share before we wrap it up today? Or?
No, I've really appreciated all the history, and I think with technology, we kind of, like I've mentioned a couple times, the newspaper. I miss the newspaper so much.
Yeah.
I think it was so much fun, but the history, hold on to it. These old stories. Art Baker coached with us for a while, and the stories he had. I wish you could. God bless Attorney Brabender made that fantastic book with those stories. I mean, those. If that's what you're into, it's just great information, and history. Really won't exist if we don't keep talking about it.
That's it. So, hey everybody, today we're here with Garrett Mays. He was a Cathedral Prep Rambler football player, graduated in 2000.
Yep.
Now he's selling cars and still catching passes and doing all the great things in his life. Thanks, Garrett.
Thank you.